Assalamualaikum. I'm here with Dr. Mohamad Sawwaf, who is the CEO of Manzil, Canada's Islamic fintech that offers halal mortgages, halal investment funds, and halal wills. He has a doctorate in Islamic finance and is a leading voice in Islamic finance in Canada. Dr. Sawwaf is passionate about offering accessible and ethical finance solutions for Muslim families across North America. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Yasmeen.
All right, so we're going to jump right into it. What inspired you to start Manzil?
So this takes me back to when I first got into finance in 2007. I was brought on as a financial advisor for the large finance institutions in Canada, and it was an entrepreneurial journey. High risk, kind of high reward situation where I had to build my own book of business. And, the training was second to none. I understood everything when it came to financial services and products at the retail level. So investments, insurance, mortgages, core banking products, everything. And I always had this affinity of wanting to help my community. And so I would do sessions or seminars, and then, members of the community would come back to me and say, are any of your products halal? And at the time, I kind of only understood the concept of riba. So I was just like, yeah, we have non-riba based products. So why don't we look at the ones that don't have interest or a component of interest within them, and automatically by default, those would be halal, which is wrong, as I later found out and did my research. And so it kind of became this wall that I kept hitting against, because our company that I worked for didn't have any products. I did research across Canada. Nobody had these products. And so I was like, really? There's such high demand for this stuff. Why hasn't anybody done it? You go to the States, there was some stuff happening. You go to Europe, there's some stuff happening. Of course, Middle East, Southeast Asia. And I was just really dumbfounded by the whole proposition. And so fast forward to 2014, I kept kind of hitting that corporate ceiling, and I wanted to kind of reinvent myself. And so I said, let me do my MBA. And as soon as I got into that program, I found a course on Islamic finance that was being taught. It was the only one in the country. And I approached that professor and I said, hey, I'd love to take your course. And he said, well, you're in the executive MBA stream. This is for part-time and full-time. You can't really do it. And I was like, yeah, but there's such a need. I need to learn this stuff. I need to see if I can figure this thing out. And does your course do that? He says, yes, it absolutely does. He's like, let me do you one better. Why don't you become my teaching assistant? Because I'm looking for one. I said, perfect. So we taught that course for several years together. And that course really created the foundation for me with respect to understanding the Canadian regulatory environment, the tax environment, the legal environment of whether halal banking products and services and solutions could actually be created in Canada, knowing kind of the current framework and not having to change those.
I didn't know that about you.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, really.
I graduated with a science degree when I came out. I was pre-med.
Wow.
Yeah.
You really did it all.
Failed doctor. A failed medical doctor.
Is there such thing as a failed doctor?
I don't know. Maybe not. A lot of people, generally speaking, after I get to know them.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, when I first met you, you were so unapproachable. But I don't say anything. I guess maybe it's just my look, or maybe they have some perceived notion about me or my status or whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm just a normal guy.
I feel like, I don't know. I think the personality type that it takes to run a company at the level that you do, because ultimately there's something unique about being in this space in the Muslim world, is that there's so much pushback. And I think especially for you, in the last 10 years, people have said terrible things about you and the company, and they're not. And so if you want to have that vision and be the type of person that is able to do that, that personality type, I think, also comes with an edge that can be off-putting. But I think that that's a requirement in order for you to build a successful company as a first mover in this space.
Yeah, listen, I think being in sales for as long as I have been, even previous to this,
Yeah.
I've always been in sales. really kind of created that thick skin and this mentality of like, you're not going to win them all and you only need to win like 1%.
Yep.
That's really the law of large numbers, right? Like you do 100 cold calls. I used to cold call every day, 100 calls for 3 years straight. Like that's how I started my business. And the conversion rate was 1%. Sometimes you have to do 99 calls to get the one, and then the 100th is the one. Sometimes it's the first call, right?
Yeah.
But it always averages out to 1%. And so I look at it as like, yeah, you're not going to win them all, and people are going to say things. So I have to ignore all of the noise. Yeah. And there was so much noise early on in our career.
Yeah.
Early on when we launched Manzil, and I actually got caught up with him. And I got so upset. I wanted to defend myself. Mm-hmm. And then I just said, you know what? Like, just ignore it and just do the work and people will see. And then what I started to see was the community started to defend me. I didn't have to go out. Like, I would just look at, some things that were happening and they'd be like, no, you have it all wrong. So that's really what you want. It's like when you build a community, and no different than your community. Like, you build a community, people know who you are. Like, they're the ones that actually know who you are. They know, they understand you. They know what you're all about. And they're going to be your biggest advocates in the public space, right? Doesn't matter if somebody comes and attacks you. It's going to it's part of the game, right? And the bigger you are and the larger you get, the more and more of that is going to actually happen.
It's very true. And to be honest, it's something that I really admire about you as a leader. I actually, the whole exclusive to Manzil thing was this one side of it, but I really admire you as a CEO, honestly.
Thank you. It's really appreciated. And I think that, like, I've surrounded myself with good people. Like, I met Iftikhar last night. Beautiful guy, mashallah. Like, I'm just like, I went to the team this morning. I'm like, man, we have such an amazing team. Like, really good people, smart, community builders. Like, they have a good head on their shoulders and they represent the brand well. And that's what I've always wanted is like, anybody who wants to be part of this brand, like they have to like carry it like a torch, like a flame, right? Because they're going to go out there, shout on like the loudest part of their lungs, like and just yell and know that, like, you know what, they have a big like brand behind them and we're going to support them and they can feel confident going out to the market and not hide, right? Because some people work for companies and like, I don't really like to say that I work for them, or I don't really want to go out and like represent them. We don't want people like that, right? It's a two-way street, right? We have to do our part, of course. And then we want people that want to join Manzil that do theirs.
I think you've done an excellent job doing your, thank you. And I personally feel that way. It's actually, as we were saying, but sometimes in finance, you have people who are doing sort of an Islamic finance thing and working with Manzil at every single level, from team meetings to the products to the execution. You feel those values come through. And so as somebody who represents the brand, somebody who recommends your products, it makes me feel so confident that when they're dealing with someone on the customer service team, when they're dealing with the platform, they're always going to experience those values that are in alignment with mine.
Alhamdulillah. I'm so happy to hear that, because that's really what we strive for. And we want that critical feedback, because we do it for the community. Like, we're not doing it for us. We're maybe a couple dozen people in the organization, but there's thousands and thousands, if not millions, of Muslims that are relying on us to do it right, to do it properly. They've entrusted us, right, with their life savings. Like, that's a big deal, right? And you want to instill that confidence and credibility and trust from day one, to know that these people are aligned. We're both aligned. They're going to manage my money in a way that makes me feel good, that allows me to sleep peacefully at night, and I don't have to worry about this anymore, right?
Absolutely. I think I have one memory of you that really sticks out to me. My first experience working with you was at the RIS. The first year we called the RIS. Yeah, exactly. The first year we did the RIS together. I remember everyone's talking about, like, okay, they're having these mini huddles and saying, this is what we're going for. How's it going, guys? How are the sales conversations going? How are people reacting? And I just remember you were the one who was going to everybody and saying like, have you prayed Dhuhr yet? Have you prayed Dhuhr? Did you pray? Everybody prayed, and making sure that no one's getting caught up in similitudes or these conversations or being distracted, and that everybody went for Jummah, everybody prayed. And I'll never forget that your priorities were always where they should be as the leader.
Alhamdulillah, it's easy to forget. It's easy to get caught up, and even I forget, right? And when people are working and they're like focused, and they hear the adhan but they miss it, and they're trying to wrap up that conversation, sometimes a reminder helps, right? And I need reminders too, right? I get reminded by the team too, right? I get caught up in like multiple conversations, whether it be at a conference or even when I'm traveling on the road. And I tell them, remind me, like, don't be afraid to remind me, because it's sunnah, right? And you're going to get the thawab. I obviously want to ensure that I'm like maintaining, right, my prayer schedule. So alhamdulillah, again, I think it's just part of the culture. People are unapologetically Muslim when they work for us. Like my inbox is full of like people that want to join Manzil. And I know why, but it's about the alignment of being able to practice your deen without having to compromise on it in your day-to-day. And so that integration between deen and dunya, and being able to fulfill and be impactful at the same time, I think is what everybody would want.
Exactly. And I think it's amazing to be able to create not only a financial institution that represents our Hags, also a workplace.
Absolutely. Yeah. The culture in the workplace needs to be like it's foundational, right? Because if you have a toxic work environment, it's going to spread like cancer, and we can't have any of that, right? So, and Islam teaches us this is like, how do you be fair to your employees, right? Contractually, and even just day to day, right? Like, are you are you being empathetic? Are you being sympathetic? Anyone who has some sort of situation, are you giving them husnul dhan? Are you giving them the benefit of the doubt? Are you trying to teach them and make them, grow professionally, and, expand on their skill sets and hone in on what they do best so that they can do that? And everybody understands, like, my impact may be small, but like hundreds of thousands of people could benefit from it, right? So when you have that mentality, everyone's working towards the same direction. And that's why we're able to execute so well and move very quickly in the market, launch new products, expand geographically, because everyone is aligned.
And I think it's really a testament that when you want to create a quality product, it takes time.
Yes, a lot of time. And I think many people don't appreciate, at least outside of Manzil, like how long it takes and why things are slow. We're in Montreal right now. We're in Quebec, and soon to be launching. But I remember before we launched, I did a seminar in Montreal because I was part of an accelerated program. We had like room for 150 people, and like 500 people showed up. It was like standing room only. And I had promised them then that, like, yes, within a year, we're going to be available in Quebec. And it took multiple years, right? The licensing, the regulatory, the operations, the documentation. I don't launch anything unless it's 100%. And maybe that's a flaw of mine. It's not really kind of that startup mentality, but I think when it comes to compliance, and when you're in a regulated industry and it comes to compliance and legal and Shariah, it has to go out the door almost perfect. Of course, we iterate on it, and it's very minor and it's not material, but that's what it takes. And so, for the Quebec community here that's been waiting for multiple years, right? Like, we're finally, right, starting to say that it's real, it's happening, and inshallah soon. So I hope that everyone can appreciate that, because I always get concerned when people launch quickly. Right? They launch quickly and they say, yeah, Shariah, and then you start to dig, and like they're kind of in the gray zone, and you're just like, why? There's so much reputation on this. The history of Islamic finance in Canada is not great. We're cleaning that up, and we're showing a path forward that's professional, that is customer centric, that is accessible from a digital perspective. That's what we want to continually build on. And we want people that want to get into this space come in with that kind of standard to start with, because it's going to be it's a long journey, and it's very hard for you to, continue if your attitude and mindset is, well, I'm just going to cut corners and see, what we can do, because we've seen that. And the unsustainable, projects or shops that have imploded, they didn't have the right team, they didn't have the right professional background or the academic understanding, or the Shariah understanding. They were able, they settled, they looked at themselves and said, I'm willing to settle on this, but the community isn't willing to settle on what you're able to. So there's a difference, right? So you want to go out there with a mentality of ensuring that what you're bringing to the market is what the community is willing to accept from day one.
It's very, very true. And I think it comes down to, are you building a business or are you leaving a legacy? I think it's very different as Muslims, especially in the industry that we're in, is we are representing Islam. And when we tell somebody that a product is Sharia compliant, there's a lot on the line. And so you have to have that standard.
I'll give you an example, Yasmeen. So a few years ago, we recently brought on a client who is a qari of a masjid. So he does the Hifz program. He found out about Manzil, Sharia compliance. He's like, I need to transfer, what I currently have to you guys. And he was with another so-called Islamic mortgage outfit. Alhamdulillah, we transferred him. Then he calls me and he says, now that I've done this, I have to go back to every person that I spoke to and recommended that product that I was in order for them to now transfer over to you, because now there's damb alay. And I don't want that, right? And I was just like, damn, like that's scary. That's super scary. And so I look at it as for ourselves, right? Like, why would we want to bring that to our organization when all we want to do is bring blessings? Our focus is to bring blessings. Our focus is to create impact, social impact, financial impact. And we need to ensure, right, that the level of the level of compliance, the level of Sharia is at a level where the blessings are created and maintained. Because as soon as you start to say, well, you know what, for the sake of profit or for the sake of shareholder value, we need to compromise, that's it. Khalas. Why? I would never risk my word or my reputation to do that. There's no good outcome that can ever come from it.
I completely agree. And it's so much more than even risking reputation. It's risking your akhirah.
Oh, yep, absolutely.
And I mean, it's not something small.
No.
I did want to ask you a more practical question.
Sure.
You have all the educational background and you taught the class. What is a halal mortgage?
So a halal mortgage, I tell people it's very rudimentary. It really comes down to the process and the documentation. A lot of people come and say, well, a conventional mortgage, I did the math and it's $2,500 a month. And your halal mortgage with the same math is still $2,500 a month. What's the difference? And I always tell people it's never about the outcome. And the best example I can give you is in the halal meat industry. If I give you two steaks side by side, my favorite cut is rib steak. Side by side, and I say, pick the halal one, blind, or even looking at it. neither you and I or anybody else in this room would be able to choose the halal one. But if I said this one on the right is halal, you're going to ask me why. Why is this one halal? It looks exactly the same. I'm going to say, well, it went through a different process. It was slaughtered in a humane way. The animal was also raised in a humane way. The blood was drained. The person that slaughtered the animal said Bismillah on it. That's the process. And so a halal mortgage is no different, right? There's a documentation and process that needs to be adhered to, and the final result is exactly the same. So when we talk about musharaka and murabaha, it really comes down to the documentation itself and the process that needs to be adhered to and followed in order for the end result to be Sharia compliant, whether or not it's more expensive or less expensive or the same price.
And so if you had to break down a halal mortgage for somebody who is not in the finance industry, someone who has no idea how it works, will just know that mortgages have interest and they're not halal.
Yeah.
How would you explain your product to that person? What is the difference?
So there's also a difference when it comes to the process of documentation. In a conventional mortgage, it's deemed interest. And there's this concept of, well, what's interest? And in Islam, it's money on money, right? So if I give you money and you give me more money back, that's interest. The extra money that's on there, that's interest. Whereas in Islam, money has no value. And if you can't comprehend the concept that money has no value in Islam, then it's very hard for you to understand that money can be turned into a profit, right? Because money has to be used as a means to acquire assets and commodities, right? So back in the day, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they had the dinar and the dirham. And the dinar was backed by gold. And the dirham was backed by silver. However, one dinar did not equal one dirham. Okay? There was a ratio, right? So it was deemed at the time that one dinar equals 20 dirhams, which is fair. And so you could come to me and say, hey, I have one dinar. Can you give me 20 dirhams? No problem. Can I give you 30 dirhams? No. Can you give me one dinar and I give you 2 dinars back? No. And then you're going to say, well, but how is that money? That's gold. Well, it's actually a like-for-like transaction. In Islam, that's impermissible. So even if I come to you and I say, here's one banana that's not ripe yet, and give me 2 of your ripe bananas because they're about to expire, that's also deemed impermissible. And there's a hadith from the time of Prophet ﷺ where somebody wanted to trade his dates that were not ripe for more dates that were ripened. And the Prophet said, you can't do that. So there's so many examples of the time of Prophet showing us and telling us that this is the concept of riba. It's not just money, but it extends beyond that to like-for-like transactions. Okay, so now that we understand that, what's profit? How do you create profit? Profit can be created by acquiring assets that generate revenue streams or that appreciate in capital over time. And you can use money to buy those assets. So it's no different than applying it to a mortgage transaction. You come to me and you say, Mohamad, I'd love to buy this home for 500,000. As a Islamic financial institution, the way that we would do it, one way, under the structure of murabaha or cost plus, as they like to call it, is we would actually, as the financial institution, purchase that property on your behalf. So we used our money and turned it into an asset, which is this property. We now hold this asset. Then we say, okay, it's Sister Yasmeen, do you have the $500,000 in cash to pay for it? And you're like, no, I don't. Otherwise, you could have bought it yourself. No problem. So we say, okay, well, for the convenience of you wanting to pay it in installments, here it is for $750,000 over the next 25 years. And if you divide that by 300 months, which is 12 times 25, that's $2,500 a month payment. So you can look at that and say, well, if I got a loan from, one of the banks here in Canada, and they gave me the same interest rate and it's the same payment, 25, yes, it's right. The payments are the same. But what did you do with the bank? You bought the house, the bank came in and gave you money, and you paid them more money back. They never took that money and acquired the asset that you wanted to buy and resell it to you for a markup of what the implicit profit rate or interest rate would have been over the next 25 years, and then capitalizing that back on to say, well, this is going to be the new purchase price or the new sale price for you. You see the difference?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you mentioned, because in a traditional mortgage, right, there are three parties in the transaction. You have the buyer and the seller, and then you have the bank. Whereas when you're in this halal agreements to purchase a house, there's really only two parties. And so the amount of risk involved is then shared.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the main tenets of Islamic finance is there some sort of risk sharing component? And in a murabaha, the risk sharing is in a short period of time. It's during the time when we acquire versus when we resell it to you, right? Whereas in a musharaka, the risk is over a longer period of time because we're acting as partners in the home. We act like silent partners, silent financier partners is what I like to call it. You still have exclusivity of the home. You can rent it. You can renovate it. You can even sell it for 100% of the profit. We don't even participate in the upside. But what we do say is we own 50%, you own 50%, and you need to buy us out over the next up to 25 years, our shares that we're going to sell to you at a profit rate that we decide before we even get into the agreement. And that's pre-agreed upon. That's, we enter into that transaction. And as we're selling our shares to you, your position in the house goes from 50% to 51. Ours goes from 50 to 49, so on and so forth. Until you reach 100, we reach 0, and khalas, that's it, we're done. So this is what we like to call, in Canada, I've heard the term like shared equity model or shared equity mortgage homes.
And I think it makes so much sense, having worked in the bank and worked with mortgages and seeing, I think where it shows up is when things go wrong. When things go wrong and people realize that the bank is going to get their money no matter what.
Yes. The biggest point that I want to share when it comes to these riba-based or interest-based contracts is, let's say something happens to you financially or employment-wise. Your job, you no longer have a job, you can no longer afford the payment. Once you notify us, and even once you notify a bank, there's two different outcomes. The bank says, okay, you've defaulted. However, the interest is still going to keep calculating or keep moving. And so, although you can't even make the payment, what they're saying is, well, it doesn't stop here. We're going to continually compound that interest. So it actually gets worse and worse for you. This is, unjust enrichment or unfair exploitation under the tenets of Islamic finance. And so basically, they're kicking you while you're down. They're adding salt to the wound. Whereas for us, you say, hey, I can't make this month's payment. The clock stops. Okay, you can't make that payment. That's fine. Let's work this out. Are you going to get a new job? Yes, we'll wait for then. And then you have the option of, catching up on that payment. Or you could say, can you move that payment to the end? So instead of 25 years, it's 25 years plus 1 month, but it's still 25 years worth of payments. It just took you an extra month because this month you had a 0 payment and we just pushed it to the end. That's the difference here. So it's much more fair. It's much more ethical. It's transparent. And there is this, sense of humanity when it comes to banking with us. We tell people banking can be ethical. As much of an oxymoron as that may sound to, the general public or the financial industry, but banking can be ethical and it should be ethical.
Absolutely. And I think what's amazing is that it's Muslims that are leading that.
Yeah, so I tell people, the concept of Islamic finance predates conventional finance or conventional banking. We've had these rules and these laws and this these standards for over 1400 years. And when you think about conventional banking, it's only about 400 years old, from the time of the Vatican, when the Medicis came in and they introduced, banking, and, they tried to do discount bonds and lending and all that stuff. That's fine. And so you think about the growth of conventional banking over the last 400 years, which has been exponential, right? I think right now, when you calculate all of the banking assets globally, it's about 600 trillion. Yes, 600 trillion, which is a lot. And the Islamic finance assets are, I think, touching around 6 trillion now. So it's about 1%.
Wow.
It's about 1%. And you think about 1%, but the Muslim population globally is almost 25%. So that's a huge gap. Now, let me take it a little bit further. Let's dig deeper into this 600 trillion that we have in banking. There's actually a 10-to-1 leverage, right? So of the 600 trillion, only 60 trillion of it is backed by real assets. Real estate, infrastructure, land, you name it, businesses. The other 540 trillion is actually debt. That's what our global, right? Like our global financial industry, banking industry is in. Like that's, and we saw this in 2008 with the financial crisis. Like a lot of debt was unraveled, and, a lot of companies went bankrupt, banks went bankrupt. And lots of studies were conducted that compared conventional banks with Islamic banks, and Islamic banks outperformed just due to the fact that they were more asset backed, which was less risk, and, they had better balance sheets. So if we remove the debt, let's say remove the 540 trillion in debt, and now we have 6 trillion of Islamic finance, because all Islamic finance assets have to be asset backed. That's, again, one of the other major tenets of Islamic finance. Against 60 trillion, well, now it's like a 1 to 10 ratio. It's like 10%, which seems much more reasonable. We still have a bit of a ways to catch up to become 25%, so that's representative of the actual population. But that's, I would say, a better or fairer comparison, because, the conventional banking system that's ruled by debt and leverage is really what creates chaos in this world. And, societies are worse for it, especially when it comes to debt-based instruments that are funding what I like to call, sinful activities, right? Whether it be alcohol, tobacco companies, entertainment and gambling companies, pornography, pork and pork-based companies, weapons, right? Like these are all things that are bad for society, morally, socially, financially, economically. And Islamic finance doesn't do that. We are forbidden from doing that. And so you put on, this lens of, okay, well, here's a system that was brought, to this world 1400 years ago. It's ethical. It's transparent. It's asset backed. It doesn't get involved in these sinful activities or sinful businesses that harm our children, that harm our society. What's not to like at the end of the day? And then people ask me, well, is this only for Muslims? And I say, no, you don't have to be Muslim to participate in Islamic banking. You don't have to be a Muslim to get a halal mortgage. No different than you don't have to be Muslim to eat halal meat. Everyone loves a shawarma. Well, surprise, surprise, it's usually halal meat that's within that shawarma. And I give them this example always of Al Rayan Bank out of the UK, which used to be called, or formerly called, the British Islamic Bank. Upwards of 40% of their clients are non-Muslim. I don't know if you know that. It's astounding. And it has nothing to do with religion. Even my dissertation, like my doctoral thesis, when you think about like what were the top factors of adopting a halal banking service or product, religion was third on the list, actually.
Wow.
It was attitude. Like, what is your attitude towards Islamic finance and banking? Like, if you had a positive attitude, positive experience, maybe previous experiences, that shaped your propensity to actually take on that product. Social influences was another thing. Like, that was second on the list. So, you survey these non-Muslims that are participating in Al Rayyan Bank, and they talk about, well, the product is better, maybe the pricing was better, I got it from them, nobody else was willing to give it to me, it's more ethical, it's more transparent, it's aligned with my values, my morals, my ethics. Great, right? Religion doesn't need to play a role, right? It's just good business at the end of the day, and that's what we should continually focus on.
No, absolutely. It's very, very true. So I have one last question for you. What is your long-term vision for what financial solutions are going to look like for Muslims in Canada in the future?
So the long-term vision, the long-term vision is to create Canada's first Islamic bank, fully licensed, fully chartered. And up until that time, it doesn't mean that we're limited in terms of the products and the services that we can create. It just means that we have to be creative. You know, we started off with halal mortgages. Now we have a suite of funds. We have an investment program. We have a wealth management program. We have halal wills and like estate planning solutions, wills, powers of attorneys. We're moving towards commercial financing that we're going to be introducing, inshallah. We want to do auto financing. We want to do halal checkings and savings accounts. And we know that we don't have to be licensed as a bank in order to do that. We can partner, right, with other financial institutions that are willing to create this offering on behalf of our community. And we will ensure that the compliance is there, the regulations are there, the Shariah compliance is there. Because at the end of the day, we're not going to compromise on our values in order to make a quick buck. And there were multiple opportunities that were presented to us in the past where we could have. You know, so many people approached us and said, we'll give you hundreds of millions of dollars as long as you can give us this rate of return, which was higher than what we're currently offering. And we're like, I don't want to be that guy that is like, oh, that's the guy taking advantage of the Muslim community because they don't have anywhere to go and he's got a monopoly. I don't want to be that guy. And so we try and be as competitive as possible when it comes to pricing, when it comes to our offering, when it comes to our services. And we want to make sure that everyone has the ability to participate in a financial inclusive environment. I tell people, we've always heard this term of financial inclusivity. I tell people, I say Muslims actually financially exclude themselves. When people, what do you mean by that? I'm like, they actually can participate in banking. It's not that like they don't have the money or they're not like they're in a rural part of the country where, you know, there's no physical branch or anything. Like they have money, but they limit themselves in terms of what they participate in. Maybe they need a credit card to build credit because, you know, otherwise they can't get a cell phone and otherwise they can't buy a car or otherwise they can't even get into a rental agreement. And so they'll have that one credit card and pay it off every month. That's fine. They'll have a checkings account because they need payroll. But when it comes to savings, they'll say, I don't want the interest, right? And maybe they don't even participate in any of the investment solutions because they don't understand investments and the account types, which is, you know, you do that very well for you and your community. And then let alone, how do you make it halal with the actual investment products that have to go within it? And so I tell people that this is the impact that we're trying to create. And so that's the long-term vision that I see. And I actually want to take that not just within Canada, but outside of Canada. I'm looking to creating a global Islamic bank because there isn't one right now. Like when you think about like I'll ask you, like, what is the global Islamic bank that comes to mind, if any, if you were to put a name on it?
There's not. I mean, to this day, most of my Muslim clients are still with IBKR.
Yeah. So there's so much that we can do. I think we're still just scratching the surface. We haven't even, take on 1% of what our potential is. And it really comes down to the community and how much they're willing to support, right? This growth now, because what we're building is for them. It's not for anyone else. And we are directly listening to your concerns. you want this type of product? Okay, we'll see how we can do that. And I think everything that we built so far has been well received, has had quick adoption. So we know that the demand is there. It's just a matter of, we talked about this earlier, is like the timing and how long it takes. There's a lot of patience that's required. There's a lot of brain power that's required for these products to be turned from, an idea into real life. And so as long as everyone is willing to be patient with us, we'll continue on this journey, because there's no shortage of products and services that we can deploy to our community, inshallah.
No, absolutely. And I think you've done an excellent job of executing and of making sure that your product offering is so comprehensive.
Yes.
From the halal mortgages to your investment products, which in Canada so far have one of the highest standards of Shariah compliance. And something we didn't touch on that I think is so important is your dedication to also making sure that your investment products are BDS friendly, which is something that I think a lot of people don't know. Did you want to mention quickly?
Yeah, so the One Vest Halal equity fund that we have on the Manzil Invest platform is, I believe, is the only EOFI compliant fund. It's Canadian dollar denominated, which takes a lot of risk on out from a currency perspective. And we've added additional filters to remove any company that participates in borders, surveillance, or some sort of occupation of occupied lands or countries. And again, this is something that we feel strongly about. We know that the community does too. And I've told you this before, try and get your bank to do that. Try and get your local bank to apply additional screening and filters. They won't. They don't care, right? Yes, there's 2 million Muslims in Canada, but that's only 5% of the population. And again, banks focus on shareholder value. They focus on profits. They focus on their bottom line. And not that we don't, but we do it while keeping in mind with ethics and values, and not willing to compromise on that, because the revenue or the profits is really just a byproduct at the end of the day. Our focus is always on the community, on the people, and on the religion. And we can do that, right? Like that's the beauty of Manzil, is we have the ability to say, yes, we can do that. We will do it. And we did, and it's now available, right? So we have a unique offering. It's a unique value proposition. There's no fund like it in North America. And we hope that people see that value that we're trying to provide to the community, in saying that, yeah, people have done this, but can we take it further? And if we can, then we'll absolutely do that.
I think that's so important. And I think that if people keep that in mind, that we're building something and they understand the vision, it's so important to be patient and to also collaborate and to understand that we are a team. And so it takes the CEO of the company who's creating the products. It takes the people who are teaching and helping, the average retail investor start investing and access those products. And it also takes the investors. It takes the patience with perhaps the platform or some of the small sort of tech issues or these things. As we're building, it is a work in progress, but this is the only way that we can get to that vision of having our financial products that are fully aligned with our vision, down to every part of what's important to us.
Yeah, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, like, Inna Allah ma'as sabirin, right? Verily, God is with those who are patient. And I use that as like a daily mantra, even with myself and my team and the community. Outside of just having this husn al-dhan and giving people the benefit of the doubt, because I tell people, like, when you're in a regulated, like, people don't know that Canada, from a financial regulatory perspective, is actually the second highest in the world in terms of compliance. So, like, think about that as like a barrier to entry. Like, if you can get in, first of all, like how hard it is to get in. And then once you're in, to maintain that is, it's like, everything's working against you. What's the first in the world? It's China. And that's a communist country. Nobody's coming in and saying, I want to open up a bank in China, right? So I tell people, I said, there's such a high standard here, and it's a good thing because there's a high value put on consumer protection, on ensuring that your funds are custodied in a way that even if something happens to us, they're still accessible, right? So people need to understand that we're working within that system, and it does take time. And then people say, well, how do we speed that up? There's a couple ways. You can support Manzil by, participating in our products and services because that generates revenue and we can use those revenues to reinvest back in the business to grow, right? And then, when you mention tech and work in progress, these are growing pains, right? You may look at us as a big entity. I look at ourselves as a small entity, right? We still have a long way to grow. I think we've done some things that are really, really well, and people are very proud to be part of our journey, but it's still a work in progress and it's still growing pains. And they say, well, how do we speed that up? Well, when you look at other fintechs out there, the amount of money that we've raised is like super, super small, right? Compared to, all the big ones that are out there, right? Like we don't have enough money for marketing. We've never had a marketing budget to start with. We have a very, very lean team. Everyone is kind of like wearing multiple hats. Some people say they're overworked. I probably believe them. That's true. But we're all working towards this vision. And so the more that the community supports us, the faster we can grow, the faster we can provide better customer service, better technology. People are asking, oh, why can't you have a mobile app? I would love to have a mobile app. But there's other priorities, right, within our product roadmap that trump that currently, because we need to ensure that what we're doing right now is still at a very, very high level or high caliber, right? And so hopefully people can understand that, and maybe it turns their hearts towards us, and inshallah they'll support.
No, and I think you have prioritized what should be the priority, which is the Sharia compliance and making sure that your products are ethical, making sure that at the most basic level, what you're offering is the best possible product. And so, inshallah, all the time, all the rest were found.
Inshallah, biznillah.
I want to say thank you. Thank you for speaking with me, for coming. They're most real and for having me.
Yeah, this was so fun.
And thank you for all of the work that you've done. We spoke about this earlier, but I do really admire the vision that you have and what you are bringing to Canada and the way that you've done it, the way you manage your team, the way you manage the company. And so may Allah reward you and may it be a means of raising your status in this life and the next, inshallah.
Ameen. Barakallah feek. Inshallah. I look forward to it.
All right, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.